Good evening, friends, and welcome to this gathering, Collective Honesty and Complicated Hope, an evening with climate scientist Catherine Hayhoe, hosted by the BTS Center. We're so glad to be together in this Zoom room with each of you. My name is Alan Ewing Merrill, and I serve as Executive Director of the BTS Center in Portland, Maine, a successor organization to the former Bangor Theological Seminary. The BTS Center is an organization growing from roots that are 200 years deep, today focusing on cultivating and nurturing spiritual leadership for a climate-changed world. We do that by offering programs of spiritual and vocational formation, things like workshops and retreats, learning communities, projects of applied research, and public conversations like this one. So first, a word of thanks for our event musician, Liz Fulmer, whose melodies greeted us as we arrived this evening. Liz is one of the pastors of Grandview Church in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and also a gifted musician, songwriter, musical storyteller, and recording artist. Liz will be back a few more times during our event tonight to draw our hearts together in song. Now I want to take a moment to introduce my colleagues who are here tonight. Reverend Ash Tiemann, our communications manager, who'll be serving as our chat chaplain. Kay Ahmed, our operations manager, who's managing technology and lots of behind the scenes details. And Reverend Nicole Dieroff, program director here at the BTS Center, whom you'll meet in just a moment. Now let's take a moment to hear from you. I want to invite you to open up the chat box if you're able to do that. And I'm going to offer a series of prompts that you'll see in the chat. Starting with this one. First, where are you logging in from? Where are you logging in from tonight? Just take a moment and respond in the chat. Let's see, Falmouth, Maine, Portland, Maine. The other Portland, Oregon, Cambridge, Massachusetts, Oak Park, California, Buffalo, New York, Sitka, Alaska, Washington, D.C., Sioux City, Iowa, Albuquerque, New Mexico, Ithaca, New York, Norfolk, Virginia, Rochester, New York, New York City, McFarland, Wisconsin, Lexington, Kentucky, Nashville, Baton Rouge, Bristol, Vermont, and lots of other places. Go ahead and continue to add your responses to the chat. Second prompt, what is one thing that you hear the earth or our non-human kin saying to us right now? What is one thing that you hear the earth or our non-human kin saying to us right now? Take a moment and respond in the chat. Lots of responses. I need to catch up. It's too hot. Help. Stop crowding us out. Slow down. Gasp. Why is it so hot? Love me. Listen to us. Care. Cease. Wake up. Listen and speak for us. Our future is in your hands. There is beauty. You are killing us. I can't breathe. Do better. We are still here. And 85 more responses. So many messages from our earth, from the earth and our non-human kin. And listen. And then one final prompt. In her book, Saving Us, which I hope that many of you have read, Dr. Hayhoe talks about what hope is and what it is not. She writes, real hope doesn't usually come knocking on the door of our brains uninvited. If we want to find it, we have to roll up our sleeves and go out and look for it. If we do, chances are we'll find it. And then we have to practice it. So the question is, what's one thing you are doing to practice hope? One thing that you do to practice hope. Take a minute and think about that. I see 3 responses all at once. Gardening, it's great. Hosting climate conversations, creating beauty, activism, planting trees, preaching about nature, walking a labyrinth, children, organizing, sending food scraps to the soil, writing letters to the editor, planting native plants, composting, listening to the birds, waiting for my 2 grandchildren, focusing on small things and community, and many, many more responses. Thank you all for each of those responses. Keep them coming. So many ways that we can practice hope. Thank you. Thank you for your responses. So let me say a word about the shape of tonight's event. First, we're going to hear some words from Catherine Hayhoe. Really looking forward to this conversation. She's going to be in conversation with Reverend Nicole Dieroff from the BTS Center team. And then we'll be joined by 3 conversationalists whom you'll meet in a moment: William Morris, Rabbi Laura Bellows, and Reverend Dr. Jim Antal, who will respond to some of what they've been hearing. And then after each of them has had a chance to share a few words, we're going to bring everyone back together with Dr. Hayhoe for some conversation. And in between, we will enjoy some music with Liz. Let me say a word about the chat. You are welcome to use the chat to ask a question or to share a response to something you hear if you find that meaningful. And if you find the chat distracting, as some people do, you're welcome to just close the chat down or simply ignore it. That's totally up to you. Use the chat in whatever way is meaningful for you. And we may also decide to open and close the chat at particular moments. Well, now it is my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Reverend Nicole Dieroff. I just made her a doctor. Congratulations, Nicole. Reverend Nicole Dieroff, Program Director here at the BTS Center.
Thank you so much, Alan. And it's really lovely to be here this evening with all of you gathered. And Catherine, it's really lovely to be here with you this evening. And I get to introduce Catherine Hayhoe. Many of you already know who this is, but Dr. Catherine Hayhoe serves as Chief Scientist for the Nature Conservancy and as a professor at Texas Tech University. She is the author of Saving Us, a climate scientist's case for hope and healing in a divided world. Through TED Talks, magazine articles, podcast interviews, church curriculums, and so much more, Catherine is consistent in her message that the most important thing any of us can do to fight climate change is talk about it. As a fellow Christian, I want to say thank you, Catherine, for the ways in which you are boldly creating connections between faith and climate. I have found you to be consistent, clear, uber smart, and so open-hearted in every setting that I've watched, heard, or read your work. And we are thrilled to have you with us tonight.
Thank you, Nicole, for that kind introduction. And it is great to be with you here. I see a few names I recognize over here in the chat. I see people from some of the places that I am or have been, like Lubbock, Texas, as well as some of my fellow Canadians are here too. And I'm looking forward to a great discussion tonight.
Thank you. So let's start with your identity as a climate scientist and a Christian. And I've heard you say that you became a climate scientist because you're a Christian, which just sounds a little funny because I think many of us would think you would say, I became a climate scientist despite being a Christian. So tell us about that.
Well, that's exactly the case. And I should say I was already headed in the direction of being a scientist because I grew up in a home where my dad was a science teacher. And so I always saw creation as God's expressed word and the Bible as God's written word. And if we just think about it, if we believe that they both came from the same author, then how could they possibly be in conflict with each other? Now, of course, we can't be naive. There's definitely lots of perceived conflicts between science and faith these days. But typically, those conflicts are due to a misunderstanding, or in some cases, let's not be so generous, a misrepresentation of what science or what faith is. And sometimes with a little patience and humility, we can work through those perceived conflicts. Sometimes I think we have to sort of put a pin in them and say, you know what? I don't think there can be a conflict, but it seems like there is. So we just have to wait till we learn more, and that might not happen until much later. But if we start from the basic premise that they're on the same page with each other, then that gives you a completely different outlook on science and faith than the sort of contemporary outlook today, as if they're two opposing platforms or perspectives. So I was planning to be an astrophysicist. And in fact, my undergraduate degree and my first 5 research papers are all in the field of astronomy and physics.
Amazing.
Yes. And it was fun. I loved doing it. It wasn't that I didn't love it, but when I was almost finished my undergrad degree, I needed an extra class to finish my breadth requirements. And I looked around, there was a brand new class on climate change over in the geography department. And little did I know, it was taught by someone who had just finished doing a postdoc with Stephen Schneider. And for those of you in the climate world, Stephen Schneider is no longer with us, but he was one of the leading scientists in this area for many years and even decades. And he had a reputation for just absolutely lighting people on fire when they came in contact with him, in a good way, to be clear. So Danny Harvey, who was teaching this class at the University of Toronto, my alma mater, had just come from working with Stephen Schneider at the National Center for Atmospheric Research, which still exists in Boulder, Colorado. And I took this class. And I was completely shocked to find out, first of all, that climate science is the same physics I'd been learning in my physics and astronomy classes. Second, that climate change was incredibly urgent even back then. Of course, it's even more urgent now. But back then, most people still thought of it as a future issue. And I learned then that no, it actually is no longer a future issue. It is already a present issue. And then what really changed my perspective was finding out that climate change is not only an environmental issue, it is, but it's also a poverty issue, a hunger issue, a health issue, an economic issue, a justice issue. It affects all of us, but it doesn't affect us all equally. In fact, the people who've done the least to cause the problem are the people most affected. It is incredibly unfair. And so I thought to myself, as someone who believes that Jesus told his disciples that we should be recognized by our love for others, what is climate change other than a failure to love? And so that's why I decided to become a climate scientist. And I'm just going to pop in the chat. A couple of years ago, I wrote an op-ed for the New York Times called, I'm a climate scientist who believes in God, hear me out. And in it, I lay out exactly why I became a climate scientist and why I think it's so consistent with our faith.
Oh, thank you for that. We at the BTS Center talk about our work as spiritual leadership for a climate changed world, and put that past tense on there on purpose for the same reasons that you shared, that this is now. It is here with us and very present. I wonder, as a scientist, what it's like to be so close to the research, and what it's like to be so close to predictions that scientists are making. We work with spiritual leaders who know that they have climate scientists and climate professionals in their faith communities. And I wonder if there's anything you might offer in terms of how we can be supportive and understanding of scientists in this time.
So for a long time, and when I say for a long time, I'm talking decades, scientists have been studying this issue for decades. In fact, the original research was done in the 1850s.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how long scientists have been studying how digging up and burning coal and gas and oil are producing carbon pollution that builds up in the atmosphere, wrapping an extra blanket around the planet. This is the 1850s. For a long time, though, it was really almost like a scientific curiosity. Like, oh, isn't this interesting? This is what could happen in the future, depending on the choices that we make. And back when scientists were first studying this, they actually thought it would take thousands of years for us to reach the stage that we're at today, because they were assuming a linear increase. And unfortunately, it was an exponential increase in our carbon emissions and our fossil fuel use. And so even when I began, I studied future projections. And so I was looking at the future at dates that seemed impossibly far away. I remember in the mid 90s, doing modeling for the 2020s.
Yeah.
And that seemed like, oh my gosh, that's 25 years in the future. Things will be very different then. So for a long time, the research that I and other people did looking at modeling was really sort of gave us a bit of psychological distance, and that we were looking so far in the future that we didn't really think of it as my life today. But now we are in the first near-term periods that I have studied.
Right.
And the projections that we made for how much more severe hurricanes would become, how much stronger our heat waves would be, how much more frequent our heavy downpours would be, how much greater area would be burned by wildfire, those predictions are coming true. And we suspected for a long time, and now we know, that with global temperature, we're right on the money. But with extremes, we knew that we would likely underestimate their impact. And that is exactly what's happened. We've been underestimating their impact. And so I think my colleague Gavin Schmidt at NASA probably said it best. He said, we are not surprised because this is exactly what we predicted, but we're shocked to see it happening in real life, playing out in our news feeds in places that we know and to people who we love. It's one thing to see it on a screen. It's a completely different thing to see it happening in front of your eyes. And so philosopher Tim Morton suggests that we're actually dealing with pre-traumatic stress disorder. And I would venture to say that a lot of scientists are very much in that camp. And adding to the pre-traumatic stress disorder is the fact that Elaine Eklund's work, and Elaine is a sociologist also at Rice, as in Timothy Morton. Elaine's at Rice, and she's a sociologist. She does work on scientists and faith. And what she found is that in the US, fully half of scientists would define themselves with a religious affiliation. In the US, most is Christian, but Muslim, Buddhist, Jewish, other. 50% would identify with a specific religious label, but she found that many do not attend theologically conservative churches or tend to self-silence in religious circles as they're afraid of being judged. And I have to say, I've definitely had that experience. I mean, when I first wrote a book with my husband, who's a pastor, sharing a Christian perspective on climate change back in 2009, I was worried about how my scientific colleagues would respond. I was worried that I would lose their respect, all the respect I'd, painfully built up with paper after paper and data set after data set. And I have to say, I was so wrong. My colleagues have been incredibly supportive, even when they say, I don't share your faith, but I still support what you're doing. But in contrast, I could probably count on my fingers the number of people who've told me, you can't be a scientist if you're a person of faith in the last 5 years. But I would need all my fingers and all my toes every week to count all the so-called Christians who tell me that I can't be a real Christian if I'm a scientist.
Yeah. All right. We need to hear that so that we can, spiritual leaders can be better in really holding this spot that people so close to this work are in. We are so grateful for this book that you wrote. I take all the covers off my book, so anyway, you can see the side of it. Saving Us is a book that people are using in community. It's excellent. It's a really good book to get conversation going, and that has been such a pitch from you to talk about it. But you're not encouraging us to talk about statistics. You're the scientist that's saying something closer to talk from your heart rather than your brain. So tell us, what do we need to talk about?
So as a scientist, I love the data and the facts. I could talk about them all day. But there's something in the educational area, a theory called the knowledge deficit theory. And that is the idea that if people don't have the right opinion that's aligned with the facts on a topic, that they just need more information. And if you just give them more information, they'll change their mind. So it turns out that research a long time ago already showed, we were just a little late getting on the wagon in climate science, but research back in the 70s and 80s showed that if there was no ideological or identity-based reason for people to think otherwise, then more knowledge does change people's minds.
Okay.
So, for example, most people don't feel really strongly about dark matter. Now, I qualified that with most people because there are some people who feel very strongly about dark matter.
Yeah.
But most people don't. And so if a new study came out saying, well, dark matter is actually made of X instead of Y, most of us would be like, okay, that's fine. Right? So their data and facts work fine. But if there's more information on something that has to do with something that we hold dear, and what is more dear than our identity and our culture, then we will not accept that new information. We will engage in motivated reasoning instead, where we make up our mind based on what people like us say, and then we only go on a fact-finding mission to figure out that we're right. So in the book, I actually give a very low stakes example of this. My husband and I both have PhDs. His PhD is in applied linguistics and mine is in atmospheric science. And so when we argue, it typically involves peer-reviewed publications.
I love it.
And so he grew up in the South and I grew up in Canada. And so we have very different perspectives on whether you can eat yogurt a day past the or even a week past the deadline, or whether you can butter out on the counter or not. What?
I said you're using peer-reviewed articles for this argument.
Well, yes, we did. We did. But I realized as we were going through this that I wasn't looking for articles that said you shouldn't eat it. I was looking for articles that would say that you should. And then he, of course, was doing the opposite. So we were engaged in motivated reasoning because it was part of our upbringing, whether or not you eat the food. Like my upbringing was you don't waste the food. And of course, it's fine a few days past the deadline. And I have to say, I've eaten a couple things I should not have eaten past the deadline. And his perspective was, no, you throw it out if it's even within a week of the deadline. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's no way that peanut butter went bad. We can still be eating it. So
I think I'm with you.
Yes, it was minorly related to our identity, but even still,
you dig in.
We dig in and we weren't looking for who was right. We were just trying to prove ourselves right. So take climate change, which is the most politically polarized issue in the country in the US, and it has been for 15 years. Nobody is actually looking for data and facts to change their mind. Okay, maybe there's a couple people, but most people just want to be proven right. And so what I've realized is it's not about arguing from the head. We have to argue from the heart. We have to connect this issue with the people and places and things people love, because I'm convinced that 99.9% of people already have every reason they need to care. And if they don't care, it's because we haven't connected from the heart. More data and facts and statistics isn't going to do it. Showing them how it affects their children, their home, whatever it is they love, that's the end.
I want to give you an amen, even though you're not preaching right now, but
oh, you can. That's fine.
Amen to that. I mean, my favorite chapter in your book was the chapter on why we fear solutions, and went through what solution aversion is. And it left me thinking about, I feel like most often we're talking about climate change as a threat multiplier, like the things that are really challenging are going to become more challenging because of climate change. And I think that's true, but I've been hearing more and more people inviting us to think about climate change as an opportunity multiplier as well. And I wonder what to me, that just connects so much with this idea of heart and allowing us to move beyond the fear of solutions that might actually be opportunities.
Absolutely. So I've been putting links here in the chat, if you haven't noticed, of resources. And of course, they're collecting all of these and they'll send them to you afterwards as well, but you can click on them too. And I have a global weirding episode called If I Just Tell Them the Facts, Surely They'll Change Their Minds, right? And of course, the answer is no, because as I talk about in that episode and also in my book, Saving Us, nearly all of the denial that I've encountered, and I have encountered a lot of it, thousands, probably tens of thousands of people and more, 99.9% of the denial I've encountered is actually solution aversion.
Mm.
People don't want to fix it because they've been told that it involves communism or government control, or they'll take away your car or your truck or your stake or your ability to travel. And
Yep.
unfortunately, I have to say, many well-meaning environmentalists have actually fallen into the trap of endorsing the solution aversion, saying the only way we're going to fix this is if everybody sacrifices everything they have.
Yep.
And some people are motivated by that. And for those who are motivated by sacrifice, more power to you. But I'm a pragmatist.
Yeah.
And I know that most of us, in fact, psychology says, we fear loss more than we value gain as humans. So if we're telling people the only way to fix this is to take away everything you care about, we don't have a snowball's chance in hell of fixing this problem.
Yeah.
Instead, if we can show people that climate solutions make them an even better version of who they already are, a better parent, a better steward of their land, a more thrifty and conservative business person, a more ardent supporter of national security, a better Christian, a better, outdoors person. If we can show them how climate solutions make their lives better and enhance their identity rather than taking their identity away, that's how we get past the solution aversion. So in my book, I have lots of stories about people I've run into, and let me just share one. I was speaking to a group of farmers about the risks that climate change pose in West Texas. Those of you from West Texas will know what I'm talking about. And at the end, a farmer came up to me and he said very honestly, and I was really impressed with his self-awareness. He said, I agree with everything you said. Oh, no, he didn't really say I agree. He said, everything you said makes sense, he said.
Okay.
But if I agree with you, I have to agree with Al Gore. And I can never do that. So that just showed that it wasn't about the data or the facts. It was about political identity. And so for someone like that, I would say, well, I don't care if you agree with Al Gore. Let me introduce you to Bob Inglis, two-time Republican congressman who has lots of ideas on climate solutions. Let me introduce you to how your neighbors are making money off wind turbines. Let me introduce you to the regenerative agricultural practices that our university, Texas Tech, is helping farmers implement. I just got a text from one of them tonight. So we have to realize that the religiously sounding objections, God's in control, the world's going to end anyways, the sciencey sounding objections, it's the sun, it's volcanoes, CO2 is plant food, they're smoke screens. It's like the Wizard of Oz. They're smoke screens for the real objections. So don't get tangled up in the smoke screens.
Yeah.
Just say briefly, no, and then move right past to talk about something positive about solutions that they can get on board with.
Yeah. Okay, one more question, and then we're gonna let some music allow us to percolate on all of this, which is around hope. I think for many of us, this time feels so uncertain, and there are scientists making predictions. There's a lot of wondering about what is going to happen, and probably we just don't know. So what does hope look like in unknowing for you?
So The Guardian recently surveyed a few hundred scientists and asked them, how much warmer is it going to get? And what I said to The Guardian is, why are you asking climate scientists that question? Because the biggest uncertainty is not the physical science in the climate system. It's us. So I want to ask that question, but I don't want to ask climate scientists. I want to ask the decision makers. Citizens will actually determine the answer to that question. I want every mayor, every governor, every CEO, every elected official, I want them to tell us how much more climate change are we going to see, why, and what are you going to do about it? Don't
Yeah.
ask them if they believe in climate change. It's not a religion. Don't ask them if they agree with the science. The science doesn't care if you agree. Ask
Yeah.
them what they're going to do about it. And similarly, the Guardian survey went on and it asked scientists what are the most effective actions to take. And now this is a really important question, but I realize that there are social scientists who ask and answer those questions.
Mm.
And so I would say, again, don't ask climate scientists what to do. I'm a climate scientist and I ask social scientists. And when you ask me, I give you their answer. And that's what my book, Saving Us, is
Nice.
about. And the reason why I'm convinced the most important first thing we can all do is to talk about it is because the social science is clear that we aren't
Yeah.
talking about it. In fact, could I share my screen here? Is that possible? Let's
I
see.
think it should be.
I would love to show you all the actual social science data that led me to this conclusion and led me to write my book. So let me see if I can share my screen with you. Yes, it looks like I can. So, and I will put the link in the chat after I'm done. So don't worry, you'll be able to see this. This is the Yale Climate Opinion Maps. And I'm going to show this by congressional district. Here we go. And this is asking people, or sorry, by county. Here we go. Is global warming happening? Now you can see that most of the map is orange. That means yes. And the darker orange, the more people say yes. So is global warming happening? Yes. And then, is it going to harm plants and animals? Yeah, it'll harm plants and animals. How about people in the future? Yes, it will harm people in the future. So all of this is still in the head, right? It's real, non-human species, people in the future. And then,
Not me.
what about people who live over there in developing countries?
Yep.
Still yes. And so what I'm going to show you next, these are results from last year. But 10 years ago, we saw the same thing. And this is why I wrote my book and why my book is so relevant today, because we still have the same gap.
Yeah.
What I'm just going to show you is the head to heart gap. This is all in our head. But then the researchers asked, do you think it will affect you personally?
Whoa!
Look at that. Yeah. All of a sudden, the numbers tank. If you're wondering, the orange areas, Hispanic Catholics and Native Americans are most concerned, but white Catholics are actually least concerned. It's not the Pope, it's political ideology. And now this might look bad, but there's one that's darker blue here. And as you notice, you can zoom in on your congressional district or your county. So I'll put this link in the chat when I'm done and you can check it out. But there's one that's darker blue, and the one that's darker blue is down at the bottom. Do you ever talk about it even once in a while?
Wow. Wow.
So what's the connection here? Well, the connection here is if we don't talk about it, why would we care? And if we don't care, why would we ever do anything about it?
Yeah.
Talking is not sufficient, obviously, but talking is such a necessary first step for humans to do anything together. It's so obvious to us that we often just skip right over it. We aren't having these conversations. And so that's why, based on the social science, as Bill McKibben says, the most important thing an individual can do is not be such an individual. By using our voice to engage where we work, where we worship, where we study, where we live, that is how every single one of us, from an 8-year-old child to a 95-year-old great-grandmother, can catalyze change. And I'm not using those ages lightly. I know specific people who have done that. And if they can do it, you can too.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Let's allow our brains to take this in, allow our hearts to take this in with some music, and we're going to bring some other friends into this conversation. Thank you so much, Catherine.
Gosh, for a moment, I forgot that I had to sing anything. I was just absorbed in the conversation. But we're going to give our brains a bit of a break and let our bodies experience some time for reflection and processing with a really simple chant called Earth, Air, Fire, Water. And you'll see the lyrics for this in the chat. So if you'd like to sing along where you are, please do. And note that we'll just keep cycling through these words over and over again. And even though we can't hear each other, I might eventually change the pitch I'm singing so that if we were in the same space, there'd be sort of a building of a chord. And I would invite you to do the same. If you are somebody who likes to harmonize, please do that. It goes like this. The earth, the air, the fire, the water, return, 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 return. The earth, the air, the fire, the water, return, 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 return. Aye, 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 yo, 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 yo. Aye, 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 yo, yo, yo. The earth, the air, the fire, the water, return, 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 return. The earth, the air, the fire, the water, return, 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 return. Aye, 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 yo, 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 yo. Aye, 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 yo, yo, yo. The earth, the air, the fire, the water, return, 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 return. The earth, the air, the fire, the water, return, 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 return. Aye, 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 yo, 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 yo. Aye, 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 yo, yo, yo. The earth, the air, the fire, the water, return, 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 return. The earth, the air, the fire, the water, return, 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 return. Aye, 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 yo, 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 yo. Aye, 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 yo, yo, yo. The earth, the air, the fire, the water, return, 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 return. The earth, the air, the fire, the water, return, 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 return. Aye, 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 yo, 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 yo. Aye, 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 yo, 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 yo.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you, Catherine and Nicole. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our three conversationalists. William Morris is a climate activist and organizer joining us tonight from California. With a degree in environmental science, William serves as faith organizer for Green Faith, working on the People versus Fossil Fuels campaign, and a member of the steering committees of both Young Evangelicals for Climate Action and California Interfaith Power and Light. William frequently engages with faith communities, schools, universities, and other organizations around faith-based climate justice and education. His work has been featured in Rolling Stone magazine, ABC News, and the BBC. Welcome, William. Rabbi Laura Bellows is an educator, facilitator, and climate activist based in Boston on Massachusetts Wampanoag land. She serves as the Director of Spiritual Activism and Education at Dayanu, a Jewish call to climate action, where she supports American Jews to face the climate crisis, cultivate active hope, and move to bold action to ensure a thriving world for all. Laura led the production of Dayanu's Climate Movement Songbook, and her writing has been featured in numerous outlets, including the Washington Post, WBUR, and All Creations. Laura delights in song, scribing sacred texts, and biking the Boston Hills. And Reverend Dr. Jim Antal is a denominational leader, climate activist, and public theologian, logging in tonight from his home in Vermont. Since 1988, Jim has preached on climate change in over 400 settings and has engaged in civil disobedience, nonviolent civil disobedience on many, many occasions. Jim is the author of a fantastic book, Climate Church, Climate World, How People of Faith Must Work for Change. He currently serves as a special advisor on climate justice to the General Minister and President of the United Church of Christ, and he is a cherished member of the BTS Center's Program Advisory Committee. So join me in welcoming William, Laura, and Jim. And now I'm going to invite each of you to share a few words in response to what you've heard from Dr. Hayhoe, as well as a question that you'd like to ask. Starting with you, William.
Thanks, Alan, and thanks, Dr. Hayhoe. It was wonderful to hear you speak. I always try to catch you on many occasions whenever I hear a speaking engagement coming up online. It's always so profound. I really appreciate it. And as a member of Young Evangelicals for Climate Action, appreciate the constant shout outs to the work that we do. We really appreciate it. And yeah, really struck by some of what you said tonight. I think for myself, growing up next to a refinery here in Southern California, we don't talk about it enough. And we live right next to the darn thing, in the shadow of it. And so you would think we talk about it the most. And in fact, when you go up by it, you don't realize that's not normal until someone else tells you so. And so for us, I think that has been a big thing of when I learned to talk to other people about what was going on as we are getting the effects of climate change here in California, but also the pre part too, the fossil fuel infrastructure on the ground. How many people really are in agreement that it's dangerous to our health and they're worried about it, but they often don't bring it up themselves until you ask. And so having those really pivotal conversations are so important. And I can echo that fact you talked about going into churches and bringing charts and statistics with my science degree. I love that. And I'm like, my argument is so airtight the first few times, and man, did it not connect with people. So yeah, second, third, fourth thing, that talking from the heart and how important that is, especially amongst young people who grew up with the science. They get it. Like, you don't got to convince them or us at all. They're curious, what do we do about it? And so that was really great. And being in California, talking about climate change, people think you must have it really easy because everyone is really liberal and green there, right? And that's not the case, especially going into many churches where you talk to them and, like you said, their identity and these identity politics really are more important than what other things are going on. And so I think there's a lot of different things happening. And so really appreciate all you had to share about these different things. And my question is, I work a lot among young people, and man, young people often lack hope. And they really struggle with a lot of the doom and gloom that they see online. And so it's kind of a two-part question, but where do these young people who know climate change is happening, who believe it and want to do something, where do they go for hope? And the second part is, how do we build science literacy among young people who are mostly getting their news from social media?
Thank you so much, William. We're going to hold that question. Catherine, I hope you're taking note of those. We're going to bring you back in for some four-way conversation here in a minute. But I'm going to turn it over now to Rabbi Laura Bellows.
Thank you so much, Alan. And yeah, Dr. Hayhoe, Catherine, it is such a pleasure to be here with you. And thank you for sharing of your learning and wisdom. I really was struck by some of what you've written and taught around love and hope. I think this quote from your book of real hope doesn't usually come knocking on the door uninvited. If we want to find it, we have to roll up our sleeves and go out and look for it. If we do, chances are we'll find it, and then we'll have to practice it. I've spent some time with, in those worlds of active hope and hope as a verb and all of that. And I really resonated with that. It feels hard to hold on to at times. And I think, this question of how do we practice hope at such pivotal moments, like we're living at this pivotal moment. And it reminded me of about a month ago, I was recently with my family in Virginia celebrating Passover. And one of the things we do is a lot of storytelling, a lot of different, both drawing on ancient stories and contemporary stories. And one of the midrashim, one of the stories that was told is one that is from a 2nd century collection that focuses on the beginning of the book of Genesis through the story of Miriam in the book of Numbers. And it's this amazing story about how when Miriam gets to the other side of the sea, the other side of the Red Sea, right? The Israelites have already gotten to a point of thinking beyond what they thought was possible. They've gone through this time of total transition and transformation, a real pivotal time to the other side. And Miriam starts dancing with her timbrels. And the commentator asks, where'd she get timbrels from? Like, how did she come to have some tambourines in the desert? And the answer is that she thought to pack them when they were still back in slavery. And I was thinking about that as I read some of your writings about active hope, because this question of like, what do we need to be packing now for future generations? What do we need for this journey, for this time of pivotal change, is one that is on my heart, and that comes up in my work with activists. I say the organization I work with, Dayenu is a Hebrew word that means enough, both to mean both like enough already, we need climate action now, but also enough, like we have enough, we have what we need. We have the technologies and we have the people power, we have the strategies, we have the love. And I was thinking in listening to your teaching about how love is actually like one of the greatest renewable resources in some sense, that we are often like able to connect through that at times when we can't connect through anything else. So thank you for those teachings. You talk a lot about love and about tuning into what we love and want to protect, making that kind of compassionate climate connection with others based on what they love and care about, whether it's their kids or cuisine or outdoor sports. I think I'll just say I love your advocacy for love as a driving force of connection and conversation, especially when many of us are feeling acutely the fear and overwhelm, the kind of anger and grief of living in a climate changing world, and knowing that many communities on the front lines of this crisis have been feeling the effects of it for a long time. You teach that we can't truly confront the climate crisis without talking more about it, and that those conversations need to be based in shared values and what we love. And I'm going to plug in my computer. Thank you. Which is such a universal idea, but I wonder whether there's maybe another piece to those conversations, or whether perhaps you've witnessed this. I often find myself speaking with young activists or activists of all ages, people who are, let's leave the word activist aside, people who are climate concerned, of all ages, who are struggling to feel like anything they do could really matter. It's kind of that metaphor you share in a couple places about, feeling like they're standing beneath the boulder by themselves. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, how do I help them get to a place of knowing that there are many hands on this boulder and that it is farther uphill than we realized. We are pushing towards that more just, livable future already. So let's share one other anecdote and then a question that the popular in popular Bible spaces story of Noah and the ark, that it's a moment when God calls to Noah. He follows all the right directions. He does all the right things. And in the Torah, he's called an ish tzaddik, a righteous person. And there are many commentators who push back on this description of him and say, well, he didn't protest. He didn't push back. He didn't advocate against this existential threat. And the comparison that's made is with Abraham, who did do many of these things, did push back, did protest, regardless of the outcome. But there's one commentator who says, well, why is it that he's still called a righteous person? And the reason that he gives, his name is the Kedushat Levi, the reason he gives is that Noah wanted to be as righteous as he could be, but he was limited by the fact that he saw himself as small in his own eyes, that he didn't have a sense of his own power. He didn't think he could say anything. So when you speak about the head to heart gap, I'm curious about the head to heart to hand or to action kind of gap, and your thoughts on how we invite people with love, with connection into conversation about climate change, sharing those abundant stories of solutions, and then bolster people to see themselves as powerful, as agents of change in their communities on a systems level.
Thank you so much, Laura. That's a great question. And how about you, Jim? What do you want to bring into the conversation?
Well, first I have to say, Catherine, it's great to see you again and to be connected with you in this way. Thank God for Zoom. And William and Laura, you've asked such excellent questions. And my ultimate question here connects with yours, particularly the way you both introduced young people in your comments. Greta Thunberg, along with many other young people, say that we need to change almost everything. And I think they're correct. Humanity has to enact the greatest pivot in human history. Now, as a religious person myself, I receive our current crisis as a call from our Creator God to our generation, everyone who is alive today, to reframe our understanding of vocation. To put it another way, we need to reframe what faithfulness looks like. People of faith need to set aside our focus on personal salvation as we embrace God's promise and call for collective salvation. We're all in this together. Or, as I'm fond of saying, we all live at the same address with the number 426 parts per million of CO2 emblazoned above every door and dwelling. The only way out of the climate crisis is to transition our current behaviors, economies, and political systems to behaviors, economies, and political systems that are rooted in love of neighbor, intergenerational justice, and an embrace of our interdependence with all of creation, recognizing the preservation of the biosphere as every bit as essential as the honoring of human life. Over the past few years, at least 2 groups have received this new call and embraced this new understanding of their role, their identity, their calling, and their vocation. Young people and scientists. To be clear, it's not all young people or all scientists, but the worldwide witness of young people, and more recently, the worldwide witness of scientists, demonstrate the pivot taken by many from each group. Catherine, you and Michael Mann have done a great job of addressing an emerging theme that can be found in activist young people and outspoken scientists, as well as the general public. That theme is how to deal with doom and gloom. And as you and Michael Mann both recognize, the antidote to doom is doing. One of the many ways young people are moving from doom to doing is by joining the Climate Corps. One of the many ways scientists are moving from doom to doing is by joining the Scientists' Rebellion. In these and so many other ways, young people and scientists are doing their part to help civilization pivot. And over the past 10 years, Catherine, I have been deeply moved as you have become more and more explicit in urging your scientist colleagues and your millions of followers to take action, to vote, to lock arms with others. In contrast, virtually all politicians have failed to do their part, which is why you are increasingly focusing your public comments on the urgency of voting for politicians committed to addressing the climate crisis. Corporations have almost universally failed to do their part, although your weekly newsletter occasionally lifts up one or another corporation that is taking on a verifiable and accountable activity. My question for you, Catherine, is about people of faith. What about houses of worship and congregations? What about clergy? Given everything you know about the climate crisis and drawing upon your own faith as an evangelical Christian, what kind of leadership, what kind of witness, what fresh understanding of vocation would you like to see from people of faith, houses of worship, and the clergy who lead them?
Thank you, Jim. Thank you all 3, William, Laura, and Jim, for bringing your wisdom into our circle tonight and for the 3 excellent questions that you posed. Now I'm going to turn it back to Liz for a little bit of music to kind of help us reflect on that.
In reflecting on hope, there is a Taizé piece called Within Our Darkest Night that talks about how there is a fire that never dies away, and whatever you might think of as the source of keeping that fire going, whether that is God with a capital G or that is collective collaboration or anything else, I invite you to sing along with this meditative piece. And the text, yep, is in the chat. it never dies away. Within our darkest night, you kindle the fire that never dies away, never dies away. The second piece is a prayer for peace, and the framework of this song is such that the verses remain mostly the same, but the focus of each verse does change as we go. So it will be peace first, and then love, and then hope. Peace before us, peace behind us, peace under our feet. Peace within us, peace over us, let all around us be peace. Love, love before us, love behind us, love under our feet. Love within us, love over us, let all around us be love. And now hope. Hope before us, hope behind us, hope under our feet. Hope within us, hope over us, let all around us be hope.
Thank you, Liz. All right, let's bring everyone into conversation. We sort of made you sit and listen, Catherine, as many people were responding to you and asking you questions. And I wonder if we might start where Jim ended, which is this question about what sort of leadership you would like to see from faith communities and spiritual leaders. Can we start there?
We absolutely can, but first of all, I just want to say thank you, Liz. Can you just come with me to like every Zoom I do? I love having this sort of moment of reflection in between. And for those of us, especially who grew up as part of a congregation of one type or another, it just really helps you engage at a different level. So I just love this. The arts are so important. And they just help us to express how we feel in such a different way. And so one of the newsletters, I have a weekly newsletter called Talking Climate. And one of the ones I did in the fall that was probably the most popular one was on art and climate. And I'm getting ready to do another one again because I just, there's so much that we can do in that area that just connects with people's hearts. It just bypasses the brain, hits you right in the heart. All right. So as to Jim's question, what I was thinking when Jim was speaking is that I really believe that if we took the Bible seriously, if we actually knew what it said, and this is also true for most other religious texts, I will say, not just the Bible, that we would be at the front of the line demanding climate action. Because it is all through the Bible. I mean, Genesis, first chapter, it says God gave humans responsibility over every living thing. And then all through the Bible, it talks about God's love and care for the most seemingly insignificant aspects of creation. And then for those of us who are Christians with the New Testament, again, Jesus says that we should be known for our love for others. And the epistles talk about loving and caring for the poor and the widows and all the people who are most vulnerable to climate impacts. And then at the end of the Bible, in the book of Revelation, it says, God will destroy those who destroy the earth. So, I mean, what more do you need? It's all there. So I really believe that we need to return to what we believe. And in America, for decades and centuries, in fact, Mark Knoll, a historian at Notre Dame, has a really stellar book that he just updated 2 years ago called The Scandal of the Evangelical Mind. It's not about evangelicals, it's about Christians in America. And in it, he traces how politics and religion in America became increasingly intertwined for ideological reasons, for reasons of power and control, not for anything to do with theology. And so today we live in a world where, 40% of people who identify as evangelical don't even go to church. Where are they being churched? Where are they being catechized? Not by anyone who understands anything about what we believe. And so today more than ever, I think it's important to live out our faith. And I know people in the comments were talking about living out our faith. How do we do that? Well, there's two key principles that I take from my faith that I apply to how we live it out. And the first, and this relates actually to what quite a few of you were talking about, it relates to the fact that the Bible is clear that we're part of a body. It uses a body as a metaphor for the church. And what a body does is, if you're the finger, you don't have to, you're not the eye, you're not the liver, you're not the ears, you're not even the toes. Your job is to do this part for the whole body. And there's somebody else over here doing this, and there's a different person over here doing that. And so it teaches us that we alone do not bear the responsibility. We are meant to function as part of a community, interconnected to that community, such that together we can achieve what we need to. But we don't have to do it alone. We're never designed to do it alone. That isn't how humans are ever intended to operate. So I love that image of us as a body. I'm just responsible for my part of the body. I feel like my part might be something to do with the voice. But I'm not the heart, I'm not the legs. Other people are, and we can all get it done together. So that's part of what I think I bring to it from my faith. And then I also bring the concept of, we're called to walk in the good works that were prepared for us in advance. I find that tremendously comforting, because all we're called to do is what we have the ability to do, what we're there for. And we don't have to be like scanning the horizon, trying to cover, put out all the millions of fires and cover all the millions of things that are going on. There's good works for us, each of us individually, to do. And that's what we are called to do. So that kind of concept of what to do and how each of us has a part to play that together adds up to the whole, but is not individually the whole, I think is really important, because we often sort of bear the weight of the world on our own shoulders and we feel like what we're doing isn't sufficient. Well, by definition, individually, it's never going to be sufficient. Together is where it's enough. The other concept I think is really important, and William, this relates to what you were talking about, is what the Apostle Paul says in Timothy, when he's writing to Timothy. He says, God has not given us a spirit of fear. And so often what we see in dialogue and discourse in the news is fear. So that verse gives us a litmus test that that's not from God. So I've noticed for a long time, and there's just starting to be research finally, showing that there is a huge negative bias in the news that we receive. And the reason why is because we react more to negative news. We click, we share negative news. So there's some social media accounts that are just full-on doomer accounts, and they're very popular because that's what gets the clicks and the shares. So obviously, for-profit media, not the BBC, not the CBC, not PBS, but everybody else, for-profit media understands the worse it makes people feel, the more clicks it gets. So we have this negative bias coming at us that social scientists are showing is the best at getting people to sit up and pay attention, but the worst at actually getting them to do anything about it. This avalanche of anti-hope is what I'm going to call it. The avalanche of anti-hope is designed to actually make us feel like there's nothing we can do about it. And I'm sorry to say, but some people have so bought into this avalanche of anti-hope that if you say a single positive thing, they just jump down your throat and tell you that, you don't understand, you're peddling hopium, you're telling people it's all okay. And I'm like, excuse me, I'm a climate scientist. When did I say it's okay? I've been telling people it's not okay for 25 years. So the verse goes on and it says, God hasn't given us a spirit of fear, but God has given us 3 important things. The first is a spirit of power. Now, that's a very old-fashioned way to put it, but if you think of it as empowered, that's a more modern way. What does fear do? It paralyzes us. It renders us unable to act. And that's exactly what all of this avalanche of anti-hope news is doing. It is paralyzing us, rendering us unable to act. And we could have the whole world worried, but if people don't know what to do, they'll do nothing. So we don't want everybody to be worried, we want everybody to be worried and activated. And for that, we need a spirit of power to get something done. The second one is a spirit of love, to care for others and put their needs above our own. And then I do love the last one, a sound mind to make good decisions based on the facts that God gives us, much of it through science. And that speaks to the scientific literacy that you brought up, Laura, and that you brought up, William, is understanding not only that it's real, not only the head, but how it affects me and what I can do about it. We need solution literacy. You know what the number one solution most people think is to climate change? Recycling. And I'm sorry, but that is not a climate solution. I recycle with the best of them, but that is a plastic pollution problem. So literacy is important. The sound mind is important. The ability to act is important. Zoom is helping me out here. And it's all anchored by this essential 4-letter word, which is love. Without love, the Bible says, we are nothing. And I'm part of an organization called Potential Energy that surveys people around the world to figure out what motivates them to care about climate change. Last year, they completed a global survey asking, blaming the fossil fuel companies, does that motivate people? Talking about the potential for green jobs, does that motivate people? And the answer was yes to most of the things they asked, but there was one message that motivated everybody across the world, no matter how young or old, where they lived, what language they spoke. And that one message that motivated people was love, especially love for children and the next generation. That's what motivates us to act. So I feel like I've touched on almost all of your comments to a certain extent, but I know there's more. So, so yes.
Beautiful. Well, actually, I wonder, Rabbi Laura, especially as we have this opportunity for a little bit of interfaith conversation, your image of a tambourine that we might pack, imagining that there'd be an opportunity for a tambourine in the future. I think part of the sense at the BTS Center is that our scripture and our tradition is a piece of actually what we need to be carrying right now. And I wonder if there's a text or something else you might want to share, Laura, as someone with a Jewish identity that feels like it is going in your backpack, or if you want to just say more about that metaphor because you've been percolating on it. Either of those things are great.
Well, I'm stuck with this anti-hope avalanche. Thinking about, really just thinking about what it might look like to have a hope avalanche. And I mean, maybe we can leave the avalanche metaphor behind in some ways. But to be abundantly have our feet on the ground and also know that there's a fuller story than only what can drive our despair. So I mean, I'll say that story about Miriam packing the timbrel, the tambourine before crossing the sea to freedom is one that comes out of this body of literature called Midrash, which is, I'm just a total junkie for Midrash in Jewish literature. It's this body of writings that has been going for over 2,000 years. People are still writing Midrashim, and they're essentially stories, interpretations, tales about the Bible, about Torah, that fill in some of the gaps, that speak to some of the uncertainties. So I've been really using Midrash as a practice, not only as a source text, but as a way of practicing some radical imagination for the world that we want to be moving towards, the world that we desire, not only the world that we are afraid we might end up in. And for me, that is one of the tools of Jewish tradition that's with me on that journey.
Yeah. Jim, what would you want to add at this point in the conversation?
Well, I think of Greta Thunberg's comments, once you start to act, hope is everywhere. And, you have so much in common with Greta Thunberg, Catherine, and I'm sure, or I'm guessing at least you feel an alliance, a strong alliance there. It's an intergenerational alliance, and so many other things. I think of the young people. I taught for 13 years before I was a pastor, and I think young people understand in a way that when we get older, we forget that what they devote their life to is something they can choose. And some of them, when they are sort of religiously cultivated, understand it as a calling. And as we get older, we sort of get stuck. And some of us worry about what's next as we get older. But it remains the case that God is up there or out here just shouting at us, pivot, 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 or some more theological version of that, right? and and we all
Transform.
have to underscore the word that you used in one place very weightedly, Catherine. We are the generation with the greatest opportunity.
Mm.
And all we need to do is to embrace the calling that is like that tambourine set before us.
Yeah, what a time to be alive, right? William, can I bring you back into this conversation?
Yeah, definitely. Having a lot of thoughts, I think, especially responding to Jim's question earlier about houses of faith and what can clergy do. And I think about the gap of there's not a lot of young people in churches anymore. And, these pews are emptying. And why are young people being taught in their houses of worship the values to love the earth and love others? But when they try to live it out in this way, oftentimes they're told, no, or we don't do that here. We don't want to rock the boat. And so I think that gap is really profound. And there's such a huge opportunity there for churches not to just treat young people like the leaders of tomorrow, but the leaders of today that they really are. You see young people on the front lines of advocacy, of activism, of all these different things. And so there's such a huge opportunity for churches to not only meet the need of the time we're in, but also to bring young people back in to the fold and really be honest about what are we valuing as a congregation. We say we care about these things and let our actions reflect that. I think that was really percolating through my mind. A lot. And also with young people and all of the doom and the social media use and thinking about love and thinking about how many times young people today, society, our systems have not shown them a lot of love in many, many ways. And yet they act out of love at wanting to make the world a better place, despite not having received a ton of it. And so I think that is just really powerful and stands out to me that is the place that people are acting out of. It is out of this care for everyone. Not care for those who think the same way as us or want the same things, but we truly do this because we want, like Nicole said, a transformed world. And that world is one that includes everyone, because we're not trying to recreate these systems of harm and have the same haves and have-nots as before. But if we truly are wanting everyone, what does that look like for us, our conversations, our outreach to folks now to include everyone in that? So I think, just processing a lot.
William, anything you would want to add to the midrash and texts that you rely on, what you might put in your backpack that we're going to need in the future? I combined those things. I'm not
sure.
To be combined.
Definitely. I think for myself, growing up also in the evangelical tradition, and it meant one thing at one time of my life growing up, and it means another now, where I'm looking at what does it mean for us to repent, and getting away from that, like Jim, you said, that individual view of it. What does it mean for us collectively to repent as a church, as a denomination, saying, we haven't treated the earth right. We are doing this, but not getting stuck there. And what does it mean to forgive, to forgive? And what does it mean to transform? And so what does that look like when we talk about conversion and converting our behaviors and acting in a totally different way? How do we apply that away from this harmful individualistic sometimes sense that we have it, and have it be this outward sense, this collective societal sense of conversion, of how can our actions transform and change, and how can we do so in a more loving way that is going to be outward facing instead of inward facing, that is showing the love Creator has for everyone outwardly and not just selfishly inwardly. So I think that's what I'm thinking on, is these modern interpretations that our context has us in, and how do we build off of the strong histories that all of our faith traditions have, where, again, we're in the right place in the right time, we're here for a reason today, and how do we use all of these tools and resources that we have to meet it?
You're making me think of the way in which religion can be very powerful in the way that it engages ritual. And so I'm just imagining what collective repentance rituals look like, and what collective forgiveness rituals look like, and rituals that bring us into a transformed reality. I know some are beginning to play with what those rituals can be. Some are going into tradition, going back. Some are creating new things. Some are reaching across faith traditions to do things in multi-faith ways. So thank you for bringing that in, William. Catherine, back to you. I mean, where are you with this conversation? What would you like to share next?
Wow. Well, one of the most interesting, I think, impactful things I've learned about repentance is that in its original sense, it means to turn from.
Yeah.
So obviously, step one in turning from something is to realize we don't want to do that anymore. That's the obvious step one. But often in religious circles, we get stuck on step one. We get stuck on the guilt and the lack of self-forgiveness. We know we're forgiven by God, but often it's harder to forgive ourselves and each other. And we get stuck in that sort of, woe is me, how terrible it's been. I mean, I've been to some repentance services that were a full hour long, and all it was, the whole thing was just, we are terrible, horrible people. And you go away feeling like a worm. Well, that is not, it's not what our faith tells us. We are to go away filled with what? Not fear or guilt, but filled with power, love, and a sound mind. And so with repentance, step one is we're on the wrong path. You have to get, that is step one. But step two is let's turn around and go in the opposite direction. And when you say repent, that's what I think of now. I'm like, let's turn around and go in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
That is a powerful message. It's a loving message. It's based on a sound mind, and it is looking to the future. It is a hopeful message. Repenting can be a hopeful message of we are turning around and we're going in the opposite direction. And this is a phenomenal future we're heading towards, full of love and hope and a full expression of all we believe and all we care for other people. And I feel like we're actually missing that vision of a better future. We're missing it as a society, and we are very much, I think, missing it as congregations, as churches, as I would venture to say, Laura, if you could verify this, I would say as synagogues, people are also missing that picture of a better future. And I love that that's encapsulated in the word repent, yet I feel like we haven't fully actualized that yet.
Yeah.
So William also mentioned with young people, there's two reasons why data is showing that people are leaving churches today. Older people are leaving Christian churches because the church is not as extreme as they would like it to be on politics. The church is not as political as they want it to be. And that just shows that for them, their statement of faith is being written by their politics and their ideology, not their theology. If the two come into conflict, they will go with politics and ideology over theology any day. But why are young people leaving? Young people are leaving because they don't see that the church reflects the values they care about because of their faith. The values of loving and caring for people, which is a core tenet, again, not only of the Christian faith, but of most other faith traditions as well. And so it really is not about doing something different. It's about, like in the book of Revelation, there's the 7 churches that get written letters to. And those 7 churches, 6 of them are called to repent, but they're called to turn around and go back in the direction that they were originally heading in. Exactly, Jim. And so that's, I think, what the church is called to do. And again, it's not individual, it's collective. And action to solve climate change is not individual, it's collective. We can't do it alone, but we can do it together. And I want to go back to those maps I showed you. Remember those maps I showed you? everybody cares, but we don't think it's going to affect us, and nobody's talking about it. So I want to show you an international map now. Let me share my screen. Okay. So this is the international map of who's worried about climate change. The gray countries were not surveyed. So only the countries that are surveyed are colored. And then if you ask people, will climate change affect future generations? People in the future, most people still say yes. Will it affect you? As you can see, it flips, except in a lot of low-income countries that are already experiencing really devastating impacts. Now there's one more map. Remember what the next map is? Do you ever talk about it even once in a while? Okay. So I don't have the data for this, but I think you could make a very good case, Jim, that we are seeing the influence of one person on this global map. I think that the reason why Sweden is red and the countries immediately around Sweden are red is because of a young woman named Greta Thunberg.
Who has spoken out, to your point, about talk about it.
Yeah.
Exactly. So if you ever feel like one individual cannot have an impact on the world, I think this map shows they can. But Greta is the first to say that she can't fix it by herself. We are each a different body part. You might be the ear. Somebody else is the kidney. We need the whole, somebody else is a skin cell. We need every part. And there's no part that has less honor than another. Everybody's skills, everybody's abilities, where you are in life. I'm increasingly even convinced that spending time with the people we love and the places we love, doing the things we love is climate action, because that's what charges our batteries. When I'm out paddleboarding or having a picnic with the family, that's what reminds me of why I love this incredible world that God has given us and why I want to fight so hard. And so we are the first to be down on ourselves. We are the first to fall into fear and despair and guilt. We are the first to feel tempted to point fingers at each other, which is not going to fix the problem. But when we return to that core word of love, that reminds us why we're fighting for what we're fighting for, what powers us to do it, and what I am absolutely convinced is enough to see us through to the end.
Thank you so much. Thanks to all of you. I invite all of us to just do a moment of something embodied. We talked about heads and hearts and hands. So I invite all of you to kind of like express your appreciation for this conversation that we're wrapping up by, let's move our hands to our heads right now and know that our heads and our thoughts are really important. And the work of those who are doing smart things is really important. And then to shift to our heart and know that this is our core, that this is the core. And it's what we might use our hands and act from when it is activated. So as much as you would like to touch these body parts and show them to the screen, feel free to keep doing that. Thank you, each of you. Back to you, Alan.
Oh, so much gratitude for each of you and for all the wisdom that we've shared. It has been our pleasure to partner with the One Home, One Future campaign for this event. And I'm glad to welcome very briefly Eric Marquez, one of our friends from Blessed Tomorrow, who's going to share just a word or two about the One Home, One Future campaign and how you can be involved. Eric.
Hi, everyone. First off, thank you to Alan and the BTS Center for hosting this evening's event and for being a partner of One Home, One Future, along with Creation Justice Ministries, Green Faith, Jim Ansell, many more. Also, as someone who studied environmental science, I'm familiar with Catherine Hale's work, so very thankful to have her bless us with her knowledge tonight. Hello, everyone. I'm Eric Marquez, intern at Blessed Tomorrow, the facilitator of One Home, One Future, a coalition-led faith and creation care movement with over 40 incredible partners, many of whom are here with us today. One Home, One Future is a faith campaign to strengthen community connection across generations in local congregations nationwide, even internationally. It's a commitment to visibly care for creation and is open to all people in all communities of faith. When you join, you receive resources and community support. All One Home, One Future resources are offered for free. Climate and faith trainings, a vast growing resource hub, step-by-step action guides from various partners from various faith traditions, and interactive events and workshops. You're also given free access to a private online community to securely connect with other congregations and leaders on climate action, share ideas, successes, opportunities, and receive guidance from all these multi-faith leaders. So please go to onehomeonefuture.com or .org, I should say, sorry. Complete the form on behalf of your congregation or sign up as an individual if you don't have the authority to register your congregation. Also, please invite other individuals, other congregations that you think would be open to becoming involved to do the same. You can be the first to take the climate action in your community, and by doing that, you inspire others to. Just as Catherine said, every congregation that joins receives a free One Home, One Future banner and resource kit. You can hang it proudly in front of your house of worship and then share pictures with us, your denomination, on social media, and within your community. Every action shared, like a pebble in a pond, has a ripple effect beyond what we can ever know. Joining the One Home, One Future community includes a monthly email with a bunch of information, free resources, updated every month, content for your bulletins, newsletters, and social media, an invitation to events, office hours, and all that. And you can reach us with questions at any time at contact@onehomeonefuture.org. Put that in the chat. Once again, thank you, everyone, for such a great talk tonight.
And thank you, Eric, for being with us. We are just about out of time. Before we go, though, I want to invite you just to stay engaged with the work of the BTS Center in a few ways. First, I hope you know about the BTS Center's podcast, Climate Change. We've now released 2 seasons, that's 12 episodes, each one offering powerful interviews, moving conversation around some of the most pressing questions around what it means to live, love, and lead in a climate-changed world. Watch for season 3 that will be coming to you in September. Secondly, tomorrow we invite you to join us for an online conversation with Matt Meyer-Bolton, who's the creative director and producer at SALT. Matt will be sharing a SALT resource called Climate and Faith, How We Can Help Meet the Greatest Challenge in Human History. It's a 7-week, 40-day devotional that invites communities to deepen our love for neighbors and our love for God. And then next, I want to tell you about our Lament with Earth series coming up on Wednesday, June 12th at 7:30 in the evening Eastern. We'll gather for the next session of Lament with Earth, just a chance to gather with others to share in music, poetry, ritual, imagery, and sacred text to express our sorrow, our fear, our sadness, and also to offer gratitude and find new strength for the work ahead. And lastly, looking ahead to September, we invite you to join us for Convocation 2024 in person in Hollowell, Maine, or online through our online companions track. This is our 119th annual convocation, Thursday and Friday, September 26 and 27. This year, focusing on the theme, Hope in Small Places, Becoming People of Refugia Faith. We're looking forward to having with us Deborah Rienstra, author of Refugia Faith, and the opening preacher, Reverend Mariama White-Hammond, and musician Joshua Long, plus ritual and poetry, opportunities to engage with nature and contemplative practice. That's Convocation 2024. And to end our evening, a final song with Liz Fulmer.
I'll close with a song from Pete Seeger, Arlo Guthrie, called Quite Early Morning. You know it's darkest before the dawn, and this thought keeps me moving on. If we could heed these early warnings, the time is now, quite early morning. If we could heed these early warnings, the time is now, quite early morning. Some say that humankind won't long endure, but what makes them so doggone sure? I know that you who hear my darkest before the dawn. These thoughts keep me moving on through all this world of joy and sorrow. We still can have singing tomorrows through all this world of joy and sorrow. We still can have singing tomorrows.
Okay, so for those of you still here, we're going to do this little ritual that we sometimes do. So go to gallery view if you're not already on it. And if you feel so inspired, I invite you to turn your video on, and we're going to reach out to the people who are virtually next to us. So I invite you to hold your hands out to the edge of your screen and to know that though we are, I think, are we international? We're across the country, maybe spreading some international. We may be far apart geographically, but we are joined together. Thank you so much for being here this evening. I'm going to let y'all unmute and we'll just have a cacophonous goodbye.